For nearly 2 decades, the X-Men movie franchise has redefined the superhero genre and made superhero movies popular again. How do these films rank from the worst to the best? Let's sit down and find out.
Like a Hellcat.
Welcome, geeks, nerds, and people who still live at their parents' house, unfortunately. I feel your pain. I am your host, Logan22, and today, on Logan22's Movie Chat, we're going to be doing another superhero movie franchise ranking, from the worst to the best, obviously. And today's franchise, the 20th Century Fox X-Men franchise. This franchise has been going on for nearly 2 decades, and from a time where superhero movies was classed as jokes or kid stuff, the X-Men movies put these superhero film genres back into popularity. And we need to thank them for it. And in my way of paying my respects to this long-running franchise, which unfortunately has come to an end of this year, since Disney's bought Fox for a staggering $83.3 billion. I think I could do nothing better than to rank the films from the worst one to the best one. Now again, I'd like to point out before we get started, this is strictly opinion based, so I don't want anybody getting upset over the choices that I have made into this film. I can be honest with you, some of my decisions on this franchise here, particularly this franchise that we're going to go through here, some may deem as a bit controversial, but it doesn't matter. It depends on my entertainment value of each film. What I enjoyed about it, what the meaning of the film is, and how it just holds up as a movie. So sit back, relax, get your comic books or whatever you want, and let's go through this long-running movie franchise. And here is our film in last place. Yes, X-Men The Last Stand, released in 2006 and directed by Brett Ratner. This film, to me, is the worst of the series, and for a billion reasons why. I could go through so many reasons, but I'm going to try and keep it cramped up here. This film is just a huge letdown and a big punch to the balls for X-Men fans. Why? Because it takes one of the most brilliant X-Men stories, the Dark Phoenix saga, and it completely butchers it. First of all, the Phoenix Force is not a space force. It's just a dual personality for Jean Grey that was locked away by Charles Xavier. And second of all, the deaths. The deaths in this film are just a huge punch to the gut. First, we get the Cyclops killed in 20 minutes of the film. And I mean, you can understand why this happened, because when Bryan Singer left this project to do the Superman Returns film, James Marsden did it with him. That's why Brett Ratner did this, not Bryan Singer, and that's why Cyclops was killed off in 20 minutes. But it's Cyclops. They could have given him a better death, a much more well-deserved death. And then we get the killing of Charles Xavier, which felt completely out of place. And then we've got Jean Grey's death, which didn't feel as emotional as it should have been. And it's the same as well for a lot of superhero movies. Too many things going on at one time. We've got the Dark Phoenix saga, we've got the mutant cure, and we've got Magneto's rebellion. Now, if they took one of those storylines out, this film could have been better. Heck, they could have made the Dark Phoenix a bit more attentionable. But no, this film takes good ideas on a silver platter and just drops it to the floor as if it were nothing. So X-Men The Last Stand is horribly written, horribly treated, horribly directed, and just a huge disappointment for me. The only thing I can give good about this film is the action in it is much more better than the 2 films that came beforehand. So I'll give it that. But the rest of it, I just give a big middle finger to the film. It was such a letdown. Anyway, let's move on to our film at 11th place. Yes, X-Men, released in 2000 and directed by Bryan Singer. Now, I know a lot of people say this is the superhero movie that's responsible for the superhero genre popularity rising up to the top again. But this film is like nearly 20 years old, and has it aged well? Kind of. Well, yes and no. The yes part being that it's got good storytelling and, again, it's introduced a superhero universe that we've gotten to love so much. And the performances, again, are very well done, and the action is fairly decent. But the things that don't hold up about it are its colour scheme. Like, this is supposed to be the X-Men. It's one of the most colourful superhero teams in the Marvel Universe. You read an X-Men comic, the colours are just bursting off the page. And here we get, like, dark, greyish colours. And we don't want that in an X-Men movie. And also, yeah, it kind of feels dated, especially with some of its visual effects. Like, some of it is used well, like Wolverine's claws, but wait a minute, those are prosthetics, so those are prosthetic claws, so they are real, and some of the fight scenes, you can tell, when you watch them, they do look really fake. So that's a bit of a disappointment, going back onto a film that's nearly 20 years old. I mean, in my opinion, I think, like, the original Batman films and the original Superman films, or even the first Blade movie, somehow hold up better than this movie, which is a huge shocker for me. So, it's not that I don't find this film bad at all. I still, for its time, think it was a landmark of the superhero franchise. I still think it's a fairly enjoyable movie. But compared to superhero movies that we have today, you can tell that we were born to be born at this. We were lucky to be born in this time. So, I can find this film to be a little bit boring, especially that there's not a lot of action in it. So, this goes down as a memorable, disappointing nostalgia film, I can put it as. But it's still a good movie, and I recommend it for someone who wants to start with the franchise. So I wouldn't recommend start with this one. You'd have to go to first class to start with. But this one, you should watch it just so you understand the team. So that's my opinion on this film. Anyway, let's move on to our film in 10th place. Yes, X2, released in 2003 and directed again by Bryan Singer. Now, hear me out here. I'm going to try and be fair. This film does everything a sequel should do. It's strongly scripted, strongly acted, is a huge improvement over the first one, and it's got some really memorable moments. Those are 4 good qualities in this film. Very good These are 4 very important qualities for a superhero movie. But, like I said, this was 2003, and yeah, I don't really find it that entertaining anymore. I remember when I was younger, me watching the X-Men films for the first time. When I saw this, I thought it was alright. I thought it was a good film. But now watching it again, I still think it's a very, very good film. It's a well-made film. But, again, compared to the superhero movies we have now, it's a little lackluster. You know what I mean? I think the pacing's a bit too long. It kind of drags at the end, so it feels like it's like nearly 3 hours long. Even though it isn't, it's like little over 2 hours long. So, but the pacing just feels like it drags a little bit on at the end. And what else? I just feel like, I think that's my only problem with this film. It kind of drags on when it gets to the end. And again, it's not as action-packed as people remember it to be, because we've gotten superhero movies that have been so action-packed. This just feels like a superhero drama instead of a superhero action flick. So yeah, that's all I can say about this film. The opening sequence in this film with Nightcrawler, I still count as the greatest superhero movie opener of all time. So that's got its distinction. And again, the visual effects in this film, especially the mansion scene, amazing. So it's a good film, but I still won't class it as one you want to watch over and over again. Anyway, here comes our film in 9th place. Yes, X-Men First Class, released in 2011 and directed by Matthew Vaughn. Again, hear me out. This film was a big surprise for me because watching the trailer for this, I didn't think much. I thought it was just going to be, alright, it's another X-Men movie, it's probably going to be boring. But when I watched it, it's got a timeless feel to it. For a film that's supposed to be set in the 60s, it feels quite timeless. Like, you could watch this 40 years from now, and it still feels acceptable to watch. Same as, like, the original Superman movies. They're from, like, the late 70s, but still people still watch it to this day because it were made so well, and this is what this film is. It's a well-made film. It's got a brilliant casting choice of James McAvoy as Professor X and Michael Fassbender as Magneto. The casting choices in this film are amazing. Some of the best acting choices I've ever had in a superhero movie. And it tackles a good political state of people getting used to mutants. Like, they're experiencing them for the first time. And it's sort of like, this is why mutant hatred in comics is an allegory for racial tension in the United States, because they were made during the 60s, during the Civil Rights Movement. So we can see it as like a mixed racism in a sort of way. So it's got a strong message to it. But the reason why it's so low on this list is because sometimes I just find it boring. Again, hear me out. I still enjoy this film fine. It's just, compared to the ones that are going to be after this movie, I just enjoyed more than this one. I think that's just it, really. I don't really have anything bad to say about this film. But the ones that we're going to be talking about later, I just happen to enjoy more than this one. So that's all I can say. So anyway, let's move on to our contestant in 8th place. Yes, surprisingly, X-Men Origins Wolverine, released in 2009 and directed by Gavin Hood. Again, hear me out on this one. I know this film is despised by most viewers and most comic book lovers because of its horrible treatment of the characters, particularly Deadpool. I can understand with these, and I completely agree with them. They get Wolverine's origins wrong. They do get Deadpool hysterically wrong. And yeah, it can be a bit stupid with its horrible CGI claws when they had prosthetic claws in the films before it and they looked more realistic, and yet they use CGI. But this is a film that I grew up with before I saw the other X-Men movies, so it's mostly this ahead of the rest because it's got a sense of nostalgia for me. It was a film I grew up with. I can't help it, you know what I mean? I know it's not great, but it's got a good feeling for me watching it again. Because I enjoy some of the things in it. I enjoy watching Wolverine in this film. I enjoy Sabretooth, played by Liev Schreiber, who does a fantastic job in this role. And it's got some entertaining moments, even though they can be very cartoonishly goofy or stupid or impossible in any way. I just enjoy it because it has me adrenaline filled. So that's my opinion on the film. I know it's not great. It's not going to stand as one of the greatest superhero films ever created. It just happens to be a superhero film I enjoy, even though it's not really well liked. So sue me, you know? You can't change my opinion. This is where I'm putting it on this list. So nothing else you can do about it. Anyway, let's move on to our contender in 7th place. Let's go, give it to you. Yes, Deadpool, released in 2016 and directed by Tim Miller. Now, this film, people have been wanting this for years. A rated R Deadpool film. You cannot get more perfect than that. And this film was just one of the funniest films I've ever watched in my life. Ryan Reynolds is born to play Deadpool, and this perfectly defines it. And the costume is completely ripped out of the comics, and the action is quite entertaining. But where this film lands its spot here is its humour. When I was reading up that he was a fourth wall breaker, I loved it. But I thought in a movie, it's probably going to end up getting old. Because in most comedies, you'll have one or two fourth wall breaker jokes. And they earn the laugh. And in this film, with it being completely that, I thought, alright, it's probably going to get old pretty quickly. But no, that's what this film has been good with. It managed to do fourth wall break jokers constantly throughout this film, and they got funnier and funnier as they went on. It didn't feel like they were dragging the joke. So that's masterful in its own way. But why is this film only 7th place? That'll mainly be because after watching Deadpool 2, because it was more action-packed and felt more like a comic book, it felt more entertaining for me, while this was a straight-up origin story. And the origin story is handled well here, but sometimes I can find an origin story a bit tacky. Sometimes, I already know the origin story, I don't want to see it, I just want to see the superhero do superhero stuff. So that's the reason why it's so low on the list, nothing else, it's just that. And I know it's a nitpick, but that's just the reason. So, yeah, I apologise. Anyway, let's move on to our 6th place participant. Yes, The Wolverine, released in 2013 and directed by James Mangold. Now, this film is a massive improvement over X-Men Origins Wolverine, and I'm putting it in 6th place because I want to talk about the reasons why this film is forgettable, and why I'm upset about it. When I saw this film, I was blown away by it. It was the first time I saw Wolverine as a genuine badass. And I know why so late. I'll get to it. When I saw Wolverine in the film before, and he weren't really massive, as he is in this film. He looked muscly, but not as muscular as the right Wolverine should be. Here, he is absolutely shredded, just like Wolverine should be. And it's got some awesome moments, like the Nagasaki bombing. It's got the wedding fight, and that final act in the film, that final fight with the Silver Samurai, I found hugely entertaining. And this is where I have my big problem with the general audience. I remember reading up on reviews that people found this final act too cartoonish. You know it's a comic book movie, right? And it's set in Japan. It's not supposed to be taken too seriously. It's a Wolverine movie with a final act of him fighting a giant robotic silver samurai. We're going to have to make it feel like a comic book in some way. They did it seriously throughout 2/3 of this film. Can't we just have the last third be a little bit more like a comic book? I mean, I will agree as well, the twist was a little bit predictable. But come on, we don't care. It was awesome to see in the final act. So, general audience, try and get your head screwed on a little bit more. Try not to get too upset about little tacky things. It's a comic book movie. Anything that's in it is enjoyable. So, try and learn to enjoy the little stuff. Anyway, let's move on to our 5th place contendant. Yes, X-Men Days of Future Past, released in 2014 and directed by Bryan Singer. Now, when I watched the trailer for this film, I thought, wow, this feels like it's going to be amazing, like the end of the world for the X-Men. And it certainly had the tone of that, especially in the first 10 minutes of this film. We see an entire group of X-Men die. Iceman, Colossus, Molten Man. We see all these characters die right in front of our eyes. And luckily they undo it, and then we gotta see it all over again at near the end. It's a hard thing to watch. Really, you feel the pain of watching it. So it's got some very strong emotions. They managed to pull off a plot about someone going back in time to stop something from happening. At this point, that seemed impossible for a comic book movie, and yet Bryan Singer managed to do it perfectly. Why? Because he had the help of First Class. Their cast, which was already, well, developed, went back in time so we could see that cast with the original cast, which is just entertaining enough as it is. So, and the Quicksilver scenes in this film are amazing. It's my favourite part in the entire movie. And the White House fight, what a spectacle. So this film accomplished something we thought could never be done before. A time travel superhero movie. People say that Avengers Endgame did this, but we all remember that X-Men Days of Future Past did it first. So that has this distinction. So this film is definitely a landmark, and we will always remember this film for what an epic it always was. Now let's move on to our fourth place film. Yes, Deadpool 2, released in 2018 and directed by David Leitch. Now, this film was directed by David Leitch, the guy who did the John Wick films. And the John Wick films are amazingly fun. So hearing that he was going to do this film, I was hooked immediately. And when I watched it, not only wasn't I disappointed, it exceeded my expectations. The trailers for this film got me so excited to see Deadpool again. And it was amazing. The action, the humour, the visuals, the cartoon-like feeling. It was amazing. And obviously, Josh Brolin as Cable. Wow. So good. The performances were amazing. The action, the visuals, the humour, everything about this film is amazing. But I do have one problem with it. Sometimes, this is where it starts to get where the fourth wall breaking jokes do sort of stale a little bit. There's so many of them in this film. Yes, I laughed at every single one, but I could tell it were buckling under the weight of its own meta gags. So they had a bit too much in this, and the script at times was a little bit too... Sorry, what? So... that's why it's only at fourth place. I would love for this film to be higher, but unfortunately I gotta put it at fourth place. Now, okay. Before we move on to our third and second, I just want to point out that, yes, you obviously know what's coming. I haven't named 2 X-Men films yet, and what I'm about to put at the third and second place were not so well received by everybody. Well, I don't care. When I watch these 2 films that are going to be coming next, I loved them. They were amazing. So, accept it. Right? I enjoyed these more than the rest of the X-Men films. Learn to deal with it. Do you know what I'm saying? So anyway, let's move on to our third place movie that has won the bronze. Yes, as hard as it is to believe, Dark Phoenix, released of this year, of 2019, and directed by Simon Kinberg. I'm going to be fully honest with you here. I do understand that this film has its problems. With them hiring a first-time director who had mostly been co-writing the films is a risky move. It takes balls to make a move like that. And okay, while it's not as good as my number 2 and 1 spot, I did enjoy it. I weren't betrayed that this was a disappointing and anticlimactic ending to the X-Men movie franchise. It was an alright ending for me. It's the same like with Game of Thrones or the Eastrail 177 trilogy. The endings weren't what I wanted, but they didn't leave me angry or upset. It was just, oh, that's where they went. Alright then. But I was entertained throughout this film. I thought the action was amazing. I thought the dark feeling was entertaining. The score by Hans Zimmer, whatever film he does, his score always blows me away. So, yeah. This film was entertaining for me, and it certainly did a better treatment of the Dark Phoenix saga than it did with The Last Stand, which was a huge disappointment. So, learn to live with it. Yes, Dark Phoenix, which is generally hated and was a box office bomb at the box office, and is the lowest rated on Rotten Tomatoes with 23%, is at third place for me. My third favourite X-Men film. And it takes the bronze here. Now let's see who takes the silver in second place. Yeah, X-Men Apocalypse, released in 2016 and directed once again by Bryan Singer. Now, I know a lot of people thought this was a bloated, stuffed film. I don't care. This was the most entertaining group X-Men film I watched. It was action-packed. It was huge in scope. It had stuff being destroyed everywhere. The visuals were amazing. And the Quicksilver scene where he saves everyone in the X-Mansion, pure legendary. And I think the treatment of Apocalypse, while not absolutely perfect, I didn't think he was awful. I didn't think that they completely destroyed the character. I enjoyed the villain. I thought he was a proper threatening villain. This is Apocalypse we're talking about. I know they could have made him probably taller and made him look like less purple, but I still thought the performance was fine. But the thing that does me for this film are two things. Magneto with his family in Poland, that was just amazing. For characters that we've only known for like half an hour and we see them die, does put us into tears, and that's a hard task to do. And then the action in this film is so well put together. It might not be the best for some people, but for me, this is the perfect definition of a group X-Men film, and it will always be like that for me. Well, we'll see what the MCU does with the X-Men anyway. And now, that leaves us with our first place movie winning the gold. Here it is. Yep, Logan, released in 2017 and directed by James Mangold. At least we can finish this video with a very agreeable first place winner. Logan is just the definition of a perfect X-Men movie overall. Hugh Jackman, as this being his final performance as Wolverine, which he's been doing for 17 years, is his best performance yet. You feel the pain that he's been through most of his life, and you feel the emotion throughout this entire movie. And for it being not really action-packed, it almost doesn't bother. It almost doesn't bother me because the rest of the film is so interesting, seeing a world like this where there are barely mutants anymore, and Wolverine's one of the last surviving ones with Professor X. It is amazing. It's the best acted, the best put together, the best emotional depth. Everything about it is perfect. This will go down as the perfect X-Men movie. Overall, Logan, you will be a landmark, and you are one of the greatest superhero films ever created. And that was it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked the video, and I know the choices that I made in this video, especially with the rankings, were a little bit controversial. But hey, we still have one X-Men themed film yet, The New Mutants, which is supposed to be coming out next April. Oof. Let's hope this goes well. Yeah. Anyway, remember to comment down below and subscribe to my channel. And yeah, I guess that's about it really. We'll just have to see what other movie franchise we do next. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Lakin22, and this has been the Lakin22 Movie Chat.